Hello everyone, Slucker here, and welcome back to the History of Everything podcast YouTube channel. And on today's episode, we're going to be going into the time of troubles of Russia, an absolute crazy time in which everyone and everything seems to die and betray each other. And well, yeah, I know using the expression Game of Thrones-esque it's a little bit overdone, but yeah, it's Game of Thrones-esque, which is how much insane crap happens during this time. Guys, we're talking about a point in Russian history in which there is dynastic trouble, wars with Poland and Sweden, and oh yeah, because this is Russia, a famine in which millions of people die. Because honestly, that is just par for the course. It would begin with the death of the last childless Russian Tsar of the Rurik dynasty, Fyodor Ivanovich, and then it would go all the way until the establishment of the Romanov dynasty in 1613. Yes, the same Romanovs who would rule all the way up until World War I, and this entire process of them getting there is a complete and utter mess, as I already said. Over the course of 15 years during this time, from 1598 all the way until 1613, perhaps around half the entire population of Russia died. And even for Russia, that is saying something. But hey, the full story of that we're going to be covering in the podcast episode, so I know I'm stepping aside here to talk about that right now, but you need to check it out. It's dropping here on Friday, which I guess at this point, depending upon when I release this, is either tomorrow or the same day that that episode releases. Either way, if you want the full story, check that out, but we need to get into this. Because oh god, the absolute mess of Russian politics at the time makes the telenovelas of the 80s and 90s look like a, well, not absolute mess. So our story begins with the death of Ivan the Terrible in 1584. At the time that this happens, Russia would see uprisings, state coups, and economic collapse just over the series of troubles that would follow. As is kind of the problem in basically every kind of monarchy, when your heir dies and you don't really have a proper one set up, this means that the state afterwards is significantly more unstable than when the former monarch left it. And since Ivan over here had accidentally killed his eldest son in a fit of rage, his second son, Fyodor Ivanovich, that is the guy who is supposed to take over, but there was a key problem with him. I don't know what words exactly I'm allowed to say here on YouTube, but he wasn't mentally all there. And I don't mean kind of spacey or anything like that, I mean he was severely mentally challenged. And thus there was really no way that he would be able to effectively govern a large country. There was another option, young Dmitri, but that guy was still only a child, and so there was no way that he could take over the throne. So now, since Fyodor is technically the guy who has to be in charge, even though he really shouldn't be, the country is instead governed by a series of boyars who rule on his behalf effectively. And it is within this council that one of them, a man by the name of Boris Godunov, would go and seize power. Now, we don't know exactly what happened here, but in 1591, under some kind of circumstances, young Dmitri died. It was officially put out that his cause of death was that he fell onto a knife while having an epileptic seizure, but other sources say that it's very possible that Boris had ordered some of his men to just off him. Either way, the boy is dead and now Boris is in charge. Excellent. Totally gonna not have any problems from here on out. Nope. See, Boris over here was elected by the Zemsky Sobor, the Great National Assembly that would choose the person that was going to be taking over things in a time of crisis. Godunov was the leading boyar, and he was able to accomplish quite a bit of things, at least when under Fyodor, but because of his simple position as a boyar, the rest of the bigger clans around the country didn't exactly like or support him. They thought it was an affront that a simple boyar was able to go and take charge of the entire country. And so due to political unrest, strained resources, and all the varying different factions that were trying to stop things during his rule, he didn't exactly get to accomplish much over the short amount of time that he was going to be in charge. And when I say short, I mean the guy only ruled until 1605. It was not a very long time. But if that wasn't bad enough, while Godunov was trying to maintain all these different factions within the country, a devastating famine would end up sweeping the country from 1601 to 1603. This had been probably caused by a volcanic eruption back in Peru in 1600, and the result of this was that summers, well, they stayed devastatingly cool to the point that crops simply did not grow. And with Russia being a naturally cold place, this was not good. The majority of crops would fail, and around 2 million Russians, up to a third of the entire population, just died during this time, which means that we're off to a great start. The ones who would survive would end up fleeing to Moscow and other centralized cities in order to try and get food supplies and resources and help, but because of so many people fleeing into the cities, this just put further strain upon their resources and made things even more chaotic and hellish for them. But the troubles didn't just go away after the famine was over. Oh, no. Remember young Dmitri over here, the little prince? Yeah, well, people were not exactly happy with the current political situation, and all these rumors started going around saying that, hey, that young prince, Dmitri, no, he actually survived. And because these rumors were going around and no one really knew what had happened to him for certain, this then opened the door to not one, but rather a series of different imposters to all pretend to be him. The first of these nicknamed false Dimitris would appear in the year 1603 and originally had been a monk by the name of Grigory Otropev. And he declared that he, in some magical, miraculous way, had managed to survive falling onto a knife, I guess, and surviving and coming back. And now he was here to take charge. So this guy goes and hurries off to the Kingdom of Poland, where King Sigismund would receive him and make him promise that if the king supported him in his claim to the throne of Russia, then Dmitri, and I'm going to keep on using air quotes when I describe this, would have to convert to Catholicism and also at the same time give Poland a number of territories, including the town of Smolensk and the adjoining territory around it. And of course, false Dmitri, without an ounce of royal blood in his body, is like, that's all that I have to do in order to get this? Hell yeah! And so he agrees to everything. He even marries a Polish woman by the name of Maria Mniszek, which is the daughter of a Polish noble warrior, and then has to make further concessions to give her more territory, including Pskov and Novgorod. Novgorod. The Russian names in here at times will mess me up here, I apologize. Either way, it's in October of 1604 that Dmitri goes and enters the southern outskirts of Russia, where a number of towns that were already in the area, considering the famine and the other political trouble and everything else that they were facing, yeah, they all pretty much turn to him and be like, you know what? Yeah, you're our guy. And they side with him without any kind of trouble. He doesn't have to do anything against him. They just team up with him. And so after a series of these events occurring, by 1605, he had a force of approximately 20,000 men that were following him in a massive caravan. But the craziest part about this entire thing is that although he had this massive force, he ended up being defeated by the Royal Army of Russia. But he would simultaneously get stupidly lucky, because Boris, the unpopular guy that was currently in charge, yeah, he would end up dying in 1605 naturally, which would then allow Boris's 16-year-old son, Fyodor, ironically, because a lot of these names are going to share very similar wording here with all of them. That guy was going to be able to ascend the throne, but the problem was the boyars didn't exactly like the idea of a 16-year-old boy being in charge, and also a 16-year-old boy who was the son of a guy that they all kind of hated. So the royal army goes and switches sides and starts supporting the false Dmitri, and then a people's uprising gets provoked inside of the capital, which results in Fyodor, the young 16-year-old boy, getting killed along with his mother, and his sister ends up getting shipped off to be in the new imperial harem, I guess you could say. Wow, but it doesn't end there. Because no, even though Dmitri won, or though I guess is he two at this point, because the first Dmitri, he's the first false Dmitri, so he's still Dmitri one. Even though Dmitri one is the guy who is now in charge, people very quickly realized over the course of the next year that he's not who he says he is. And then worse yet than being imposter, he was pretty much a puppet of the Polish king, and the Russians did not like that. The ultimate goal of the Polish king was to conquer all of Russia and convert them to Catholicism. And again, they did not like that. So in May of 1606, a new uprising would begin in Moscow, and as a result of this, Dmitri would get killed. Again, I guess. The power in the country would then pass into the hands of the Duma of the Boyars, whose leader was a guy by the name of Vasily Shutsky. But despite yet another power change, because I know amazingly enough that's very surprising that the system would not be stable, it remained unstable. And as the internal political situation inside of Russia continued to deteriorate, the power of the Tsar really only extended as far as the surrounding territory around Moscow, and that's it. Instead, in the southern part of the country, there was another powerful uprising that would take place under the Kazakhs that was led by a man by the name of Ivan Bolotnikov. Bolotnikov? Again, the Russian names. The gist of it is that the Crimean Tatars, as well as the Cossacks and the other nomadic horse people from the south, saw that Russia was in a much weakened state and decided to move forward and influence things in politics themselves, while simultaneously burning down towns and taking people captive and, doing the whole raiding thing of the classic nomad. But of course, because of how unstable everything is, once more rumors begin to circulate around that Prince Dmitri had actually survived. Again! So in 1607, a new imposter appeared, Dmitri II, who once again would receive help from Poland, who then wanted even more territory inside of Russia. Vasily would decide that there was no way that he was going to be able to beat this force, and so he would try to seek military assistance, if you will, from Sweden. I say assistance, but of course it's pretty much begging them for help, because he would have to bribe them by offering them territories around the territory of what is today St. Petersburg. And with the help of the fighters from Sweden, the nephew of Vasily, a guy by the name of Sculpin, he would manage to rout the armies of Dmitry II. But then in the year 1610, the guy suddenly dies, and it seems it was from poisoning because he was the only guy who was actually doing anything, and the people around him got jealous. So they poisoned him. This meant that the Polish were then able to renew their intervention inside of Russia, and the Polish army was soon approaching Moscow. With everything turning against him, this pretty much sealed the fate of Vasily, because the nobility turned against him and then locked him inside of a monastery. Now instead, power within the government was going to be passed down to 7 boyars who were going to rule the country on his behalf, which gave this period the nickname of the Council of 7 Boyars. Amazingly enough, I know the naming sense is wonderful. And because of their very desperate situation, they pretty much had to give the Polish king whatever it is that he wanted, which in this case was to accept the son of Sigismund III, Vladislav, to be the new Russian Tsar. Which, for anyone confused about what kind of situation this would create, this would almost be a personal union in the sense of 2 countries that are ruled by the same monarch. Though in this case, upon the death of Sigismund III, his son would then inherit Poland, which means it would unite the 2 countries rather than being ruled separately. Only for the King of Poland to go back and say, you know what? No, I want to rule everything directly. So screw these Dimitris and the other Russians. We're going after and we're going to take all of Russia. And it's on that note that I think I'm going to leave this episode. Yeah, I know we're not completing the entire thing for the Time of Troubles, because if you want that full thing, you're going to need to check out the podcast episode, because we go into way more detail than any of the stuff that we discussed on here. But everyone, thank you very much for watching. I really hope that you did enjoy the video. I really hope you enjoyed learning about this time period, because I find it to be fascinating. And I ask that you please like, comment, and subscribe, and do everything you can to help these videos in the algorithm. I know that not every video is going to be a crazy pop culture, oh my god, this thing is awful or bad, but I really do enjoy making history videos to be able to teach and show people things and to entertain. So every bit of interaction with these helps, and I appreciate all of you that do. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Let me know in the comment section what we should do next, and goodbye.